Program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of this station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
What do you do when you're a school teacher and you retire after a lifetime in the classroom? Well, if you're Laban and Sussy West, it makes it a whole lot easier. If you've got a son working as a missionary in China, you pack up and head to China and explore a brand new world. That's the case of a couple I've got right here in the studio with me right now, Laban West and Sussy West. Laban, how long were you teaching?
I taught in a private Christian school for 17 years, and then I have 19 years in Oklahoma City Public Schools teaching elementary music.
19 years in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. Now, Sussy, I understand you were more administration than you were teaching, were you not?
Right. I started out as a teacher in 1973 and taught till 76 or 77. And then worked in special education, locating kids that weren't in school, that had disabilities, and getting them in school actually until 2011.
So 2011, you shut it down, and Laban
Yes.
stayed in the classroom until
I retired early part of last year.
And I know the thing that I know most about you, of course, is your music. You said you taught elementary, but also in college I had a chance to hear some of your choir groups years ago, and may I say you're one of the best pianists I think I've ever heard. So I know you're a tremendous musician. How in the world did you wind up getting a son in China, though? Not everybody's kid comes home and tells mom and daddy, hey, I want to go to China. Tell me the story. How'd that happen?
Well, it started with our son, and we're going to, for purposes today, we're going to use the name Eugene because he is in China, and he goes by that kind of a pseudonym while he's there. Several years ago, and I'm not sure of the exact year, when he was just out of high school or in high school, he took a missions trip to Peru. Actually, he made a couple of trips to Peru, and during that time, he felt the call to be a missionary, and also as out of that experience, he was acquainted with another person who was a missionary in China, and the word got around that Eugene might do well in China. There was another missionary there that was doing some evangelistic work, and he put Eugene in contact with this person in China. Our son went there for a couple of weeks just to check it out, and the rest is history.
Can I add a little bit there?
Sure.
When he went to China that 2 weeks, he came back, and he absolutely hated China.
Okay.
Because he was down in the south part near Hong Kong and around in Guangzhou and different areas, and I won't name any other areas, but at that point, that's where he visited. And he came home. It was hot and humid there. He does not like heat and humidity. He did not like it at all. And actually started to college, and one day he asked me to meet him for lunch, and I met him for lunch, and he said, Mom, I'm quitting college, I'm going to China. And I said, you just told me that you were going to China, that you hated it. And he said, Mom, I just had a dream of millions of people dying and not knowing Jesus, and he said, I've got to go back. And he made plans from that time on, stayed about 4 more months and prepared, and then went to China for the first time. The first trip was 2 weeks. That time he stayed 11 months before he came home.
So he actually quit college to go become a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, without a college degree, no training like that, I think it would be kind of hard to find anybody to support you and send you out. How did he do it?
He did it by a lot of the people that were on his mission trips with him. He actually went on 2 different ones that summer to Peru. The other people saw his dedication, the leader of that group, and a lot of them were his first supporters.
Okay.
And some of them still support him. He still keeps up with some of that group.
Well, if I understand, if my memory serves me correct, because I did meet him here a few years ago in a church where I was involved. He must have kind of liked Peru. I think, didn't he marry a lady from Peru?
He ended up marrying a girl from Peru that had actually seen him on one of his missions trips to Peru during the summer before he ever did the China thing. And she actually became a Christian as a result of that encounter. She had been raised in Peru, and over a period of time, they ended up getting married. We actually went to Peru for the wedding, which was a great experience in that culture. And then they both ended up going back to China later as a married couple. And, of course, they're living there today with 3 of our grandkids.
So that is one of the drawing cards to get you to go over to China once in a while to visit.
Yeah. Glenn, I might say regarding the educational thing, Ben, he did a lot of reading. Our son loved to read. He read some of the theologians that are well recognized in church history, and he can probably sit down and carry on a conversation with just about anyone with regard to theology. And I'm not saying that's a substitute necessarily for a college degree, but he realizes now the importance of that, and I think at some point that will happen in his life, whether by doing it online or what. But I think he's already made some attempts to go ahead and acquire a college degree.
Can I tell a funny story?
Please do.
When the kids were teenagers and Ben became a Christian, he really wasn't a Christian as an early teenager, really got into some trouble, actually shoplifted and did some things, and went to a youth quest that our church sponsored back east, and came back a different kid and never was the same. He was just like he was doing things that weren't good. All of a sudden, his whole life changed and everything became different. It was all about Jesus. We used to check the kids' computer use because as parents, responsible parents, you have to check and see what your children are doing on the computer.
And particularly if you're in the schools and you know what's going on.
And so Laban would go in and check once a week or two and just see. Ben was always on the websites or whatever of all the old preachers, Martin Luther, John Wesley, reading sermons, Spurgeon. He knew every one of them, bought their books, read he loved that. And that was what gave him inspiration. He could name many more if he were here with us today.
But just trying to picture the idea of a kid who, first of all, is a mischievous kid who gets in trouble, who drops out of high school, who takes a trip, or out of college, takes a trip to Peru, falls in love with the gal, comes home, decides he's going to be a missionary to China without any backing organization support, packs up, goes over and does it and makes a success of it. That's rather an incredible kind of a kid. And, of course, I know not only you're very proud of him, but you guys both got quite involved in going over and supporting him. Who was the first one to go to China to see him?
We both went together.
You went together?
Yes. We went together, actually, in our first trip was in 2005 when we went to China to witness the birth of our first grandson.
Okay.
Or our only grandson, but the first grandchild.
And
then you went over, Susie, did you not by yourself for a while?
We've gone over several times separately. Both of us have been there about 5 times. And actually, you've been one up on me now because you went when you went to Nepal and Bangladesh. So he went on a mission trip, and Ben booked him through China, of course.
Okay, now your son, of course, went over legally as a school teacher, I think, and was working, teaching school for a time. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about some of the process when he started getting involved, trying to get. I mean, I've worked around missions. Ellen and I spent 7 years in the Philippines and 10 years in Budapest, Hungary, and you don't just walk up to a embassy someplace of another country and say, hey, I want to go over as a missionary to your country, give me a visa. It don't work that way. How in the world did he work through the process, and what does he find himself once he gets there? I mean, when I was in Budapest, say we had a church I could go in and pastor. When I was in Manila, had a nice school I could go in and teach in. You don't do that in China. So how do you get involved? How do you get started? What do you do?
When he was there, the first trip before he was married and he was working actually for this other organization, he actually entered China many, many times. His responsibility or job was to carry literature, Christian literature, and he would take that across the border many, many times. And a lot of times it would involve carrying cash, and it would be taken to the national ministers there in China. He traveled all over China, up and down the east coast of China. So he became very familiar with the Chinese customs and how to get around and where to go, what to say, what not to say. And
he learned the language.
He learned the language because
he does know the language.
He is fluent in Chinese, Mandarin, and he can write it and
read it.
And he actually speaks Spanish. He's very fluent in Spanish, maybe more so than English, because he talks to his wife in Spanish. In fact, talking about a story, usually when they're together and they don't want us to hear something, they just start talking in Spanish. But he can speak Spanish and Chinese. And he also has picked up on the Tibetan language. That's a goal. He's not extremely fluent there, but he can speak enough to get along and to be able to speak to some of the Tibetan people. And while we're talking about Tibet, that is where his heart has been. He's wanted to minister and reach out to the far western part of China where the Tibetans live on the Tibetan Plateau. And if you haven't read about or understand the living conditions, you can be walking on flat ground and you're at 12,000 feet. Wow. It's a very, very different kind of culture, and he loves the people. In our trips that we've been there, we've met Tibetans. We've been around them very closely, and it's a very, very unique culture to visit. I have another story. I don't know if you're ready for it now. But
we'll just wait for just a moment.
Okay.
We've got to take a break here. I was just thinking, though, when I get up to 8,000 or even 10,000 feet, I'm huffing and puffing, can hardly survive. The idea of living 12,000 feet at normal, that's rather scary. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio, talking today with Laban and Sussy West. They're retired school teachers who happen to have a son that wound up in China doing mission work. And they have almost created a brand new career of going back and forth to China and supporting their son and family. Oh, yeah, they get to see the grandkids as well, but almost made a career out of being a missionary to a missionary in China. We got to take a break. We're coming right back, so please stay right here with me.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline home phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
I've made up my mind.
Welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard, visiting today with Laban and Sussy West. Laban and Sussy are retired school teachers right here in the Oklahoma City school system. And to make life a little bit more exciting, they had a son, went over to China, started doing mission work, and they found themselves pack mules hauling materials and supplies back and forth to China to be with kids and grandkids. Laban, it was just, an incredible story, as you and Susan was talking about in our first segment. When your son goes over, he drops out of college, he goes to Peru, he meets a girl, falls in love, comes back home, decides he wants to be a missionary in China. He learns the language. He's already learned Spanish, I guess, they speak in Peru. Gets involved there. That is one incredible story, and I know you guys are just as proud as you can be of all the things that he's been doing. Talk a little bit more about the actual kind of things that he does and that you do. I don't know, have you been able to involve your music in his work over there any, or Chinese music is quite different than what you taught in the Oklahoma City school system? What's it been like?
When you mentioned the music, actually about 3 years ago when I was teaching with Oklahoma City, I was afforded the opportunity to go. I was given a grant to travel and to do a music study, and it wasn't necessarily a Christian thing, but it was a time that I got to go and visit some music festivals in China. I actually got to go to what they call tea parties, and we sat down and they were playing certain instruments like the erhu, what we would call a dulcimer. It's a Chinese dulcimer, and actually I had a chance to sit down and play the dulcimer a little bit. I picked it up a little bit and played with the group. So that was a lot of fun, but that was in conjunction with a school function or a school grant that was given to me to go, and it was very informative. In fact, I used much of that information when I came back and was teaching teaching music in the elementary school. As far as our son and his daily routine and ministry, in China, it's hard. You cannot go out and preach on a street corner.
You certainly don't go on the radio and announce an evangelistic service down the corner.
You cannot. It is not legal to pass out literature, Christian literature. You can establish relationships. You can go out and you can talk, and our son has done this many times. You can strike up a conversation with someone on the street, in a restaurant,
in a taxi cab.
And
can they pass out literature, the Chinese people, in some of those areas? I know when I went to Budapest, of course, we had several people in our church who were smuggling literature over into Romania. And of course, if we got caught doing it, we'd be thrown in jail. But the Romanian people themselves many times could get away with.
Well, I think it's just opposite in China. If they were caught passing out literature, they would probably be the ones thrown in jail.
Okay.
Especially Christian literature.
Christian literature, and you would be the one that has your visa revoked. And in fact, this just happened to our son recently, where, without going into great detail, the police confronted him, and he had been distributing or had some literature in his possession. Actually, they didn't find him or catch him passing out the literature. He had it in his possession, and they revoked his visa for almost immediately. They gave him 15 days to leave the country. They did not revoke. It was not a permanent revocation of his visa. He was allowed to come back in as a tourist, but it's become a little bit harder because he has to go out of the country to get another tourist visa and then come back in. So he's working through that, and the Lord has been good to him in allowing that to continue to where he can come back. His family did not their visas were not revoked, but his was. And so right now they're working through that situation, and it seems to be working out okay.
His wife is actually teaching, and she has a visa. No, she is not.
Okay, so she is.
They haven't been here long enough for her to ever be a U.S. citizen. That was another funny story. Her family could not imagine her marrying an American and not wanting to come to America. And she was living in China over a year before she ever came to America. And it took a lot to get her into America. Even though they were married, they did not want to grant visas from Peru for her to come to America, and it was a very hard struggle to get her here.
Susie, how did you handle the whole emotion involved in, I know most mothers like to see their kids grow up, get married, have their grandkids, keep them close to home, get a nice job, prosper. Probably when you got to China, his living conditions was not what you would have expected, or certainly would not have been in Oklahoma City.
Absolutely.
And you see the kids becoming multinational, or probably more. If they were they born over there?
2 of them were born there. One of them, when they were here on leave, was born one time. The youngest was born here. And the first one was born in primitive conditions that you could not even imagine.
So they're probably more Chinese than they are American.
Well, they're pretty American, but they speak all 3 languages. I'm very proud of them.
The birth of our first son in 2005, we witnessed it in the hospital. And it was literally, if you go back and look at the history of our hospitals in our country, it was like walking into a hospital 150 years ago.
Yeah.
But this isn't, I'm sure in Beijing and some of the major towns, but they live in a rural area, and it was the first foreign-born baby in that hospital. And the baby was born and everything was fine, but it was very, very primitive. It was, people here would be aghast at what it was. But as far as my feelings, Glenn, I am so proud of him and what the Lord has done in his life and his family. People say, how can you let them live there? How can you do that? And it's like, how could you stop them? I don't know how you would do it. He could live here where I would think he was safe. There's no place safe in the world. He could be going down to 7-Eleven from my house and get killed in a car accident. Yeah. I can't keep him or his family safe. God's the only one that can do that, and with God's timing, he's in charge. I'm not.
And the excitement of being able to go over and see and participate. I know when we were in the Philippines, Mom and Dad was able to fly over. They both were not in health to come to Budapest when we were there. But to take them into the Philippines, let them ride in some of the jeepneys, see some of the things around there. There was a thrill and excitement about that I'm sure you guys just run into continuously and see the effects of it. This is quite an experience for a school teacher, isn't it, Laban?
Oh, it is. And Glenn, if I can finish my story from a while ago regarding what Ben does, what our son does, establishing these relationships with a taxi driver or with someone in the restaurant, if the subject of religion comes up, you can just about talk all you want to.
Oh, really?
As long as it's not
as long as you don't bring it up.
That you're not bringing it up and you're not trying to push it on them, and they bring it up and they're in a discussion with you, you can give your testimony. That is not a problem. In fact, this was the one story I wanted to tell. When our son first went to this area where he lived, it's a highly Muslim populated area. Well, he found a particular Muslim, a young Muslim that was going to teach him how to read Chinese, and this was when he was learning the language. And what our son did. He had a Bible that had English and Chinese, and so he was using the Bible to be taught the Chinese language. Well, after a few weeks or months, he noticed that the Muslim looked at him and mentioned to him and said, "Well, what about us Christians?" And my son thought, he just said the word us. What does he mean by that? Well, to make a long story short, the Muslim had given his heart to the Lord as a result of them using the Bible. And I met this person. He was truly a Christian, had become a Christian as a result of that. And our son wasn't even trying to do that at the time. He was just using his services to help him learn the language.
Do you find much English? In fact, I read here a while back that the largest English-speaking nation in the world is China. There are more English speakers in China than there is in the United States. That's a result of population.
Yes.
They try.
And they try.
They try. They all want to try. I think they think to be upwardly mobile, to get to the bigger cities, to make the money, because it's becoming very materialistic. They have to know English well. And you will have people walk up on the street and say, will you practice English with me? I have an English test, and they want to learn how we talk and how we say things.
It's not unusual to be encountered with someone that wants to talk English to you. And the little kids on the street, when they get out of school, they'll look and see you as an American, and the first thing they'll do, they'll say, hello, hello.
Oh, they don't say it that way.
And
they say, hello, hello.
I think that's true pretty well around the world. Ellen and I even, in Turkey and various places have had people walk up, hear us speaking, and sit down at our table and say, can we practice our English? You mentioned the Muslim thing. What's the Muslim-Chinese relationship? Is there a lot of tensions over there? Do you feel the insecurity of that? We've only got a couple of minutes left.
No. In the Muslim area where they're at, the Chinese are in full control of the
So Islam is a very minor.
But it's in this particular city there are mosques everywhere.
Okay.
Like in our
300
country,
in one city.
A tremendous number of mosques.
That's not a little city.
No. There's, as far as we know now, in far western China, you probably heard on the news there are some conflicts with regard to
the Uyghur people,
the Uyghurs, and a certain minority group in China, and some of that may have some Muslim influence, possibly, but it's way far in the far western district of China. It's not anywhere near where our son.
The Muslim people where he lives in the actual town, or where he used to live, or near his area, have been there since the 13th. It's the end of the Silk Road, and they've been there since the 13th
the Chinese
century.
Give them freedom of religion.
They're very
because
Chinese.
They consider them an indigenous people to that area, that country.
Interesting. Susie, I'll tell you what, I wish we had a whole hour for this, because this is just a fascinating study. Obviously, anything involving overseas and languages and all that, they always make all these jokes about if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2, you're bilingual. If you speak 1, you're an American. Unfortunately, we found that kind of true around the world. I was in Wycliffe here just a while back for a conference, and, talking with people who know 12, 15, 18 different languages and are creating them. Just amazing what they do. But it's so exciting, and I can't think of anything more exciting to do when you retire from teaching school than to go to China and watch your son and see what all they're doing and getting involved in yourself. I think it's absolutely incredible. And I appreciate so much your coming in to share with us today. Thanks so much, and I just wish you the very best and hope that things work out well for him and his family. And they just have a great time. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. We've been talking to Laban and Sussy West, Oklahoma City school teachers who retired and decided it was a whole lot more fun going overseas to watch kids and grandkids in China being missionaries on the field. Hey, we got to go. So good to have you with me. Come back, join us again this same time next week. Until then, be kind to everybody you meet. Do something good for somebody, especially yourself. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find